Council, are we ready to continue? If we are, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. We are ready to proceed. I believe the usher is bringing in the witness.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cham. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I hope that you had a good break.
Yeah.
Prior to the break, you were telling us about your personal ordeal. You started by telling us that on 30th May 2006, you were arrested and taken to Serekunda Police Station. Thereafter, you were taken to Banjul, to Central Police Station, where you slept, and then the next day, in the evening, you were taken to the NIA headquarters in Banjul.
Correct.
You then told us around 2:30 in the morning, you were escorted outside, still within the premises of the NIA, but outside in the yard where there was some kind of pit, and you were placed in the middle of that pit. You were then tortured by about 8 individuals whom you don't recognize, and present were Musa Jame of State Guard, alias Malia Mungu, Tumbul Tamba, also State Guard, who appeared to be in charge of the torture operation. You told us that you were tortured for about 20 to 30 minutes, being beaten as well as questioned. Thereafter, you told us the injuries that you suffered. You were bleeding a lot. Parts of your skin was broken, and thereafter you were taken back into the NIA building. You told us that you were taken to a room where you found Deputy Director of the NIA. You referred to him as Mohammed Haidara, as well as Nuru Seka of the NIA, who I believe you said was the head of operations. Is that correct?
Correct.
So when you arrived in that room, Nuru Seka and Mr. Haidara were present.
Yes.
Who else was in that room?
Tumbul Tamba and Maliamugu came with me to that room, but the rest of the torture gang were behind the doors. They didn't enter the room.
At the time, you said you were bleeding profusely, and you were led into the building. You must have been dripping with blood at the time, is that correct?
Yes, and I remember one civilian, mostly a civilian staff of the NIA, came with a cup or something like that, and he was cleaning my blood from the carpets, which were stained. My foot, as I was going to that room, he was cleaning blood from the carpets or the floor there. That was a civilian. He was not in the panel, but he too was, he could have been part of the torturers, I didn't know, but he was not in uniform anyway. He was cleaning the floor. And when after I left too, I saw him cleaning where I sat in the room, the interview room.
So from what you've said, you were, a person looking at you could tell that you were visibly tortured, is that correct?
Yeah, it was very clear. It was very clear. I mean, I had blood all over my body. I didn't even know at the time what spot where I bleed. There was blood all over me. My feet were particularly very, very, very bad because I saw my skin was peeled off. And it was Duta Kamaso who was detained along with us there, who came and acted as a mother. He was helping me. And then the other colleagues, Malik Mbu, Flamin Fati, and others were also in solidarity. That the middle of the night, it was 2 a.m. or something like that.
So I want to focus on the individuals who were in the room.
Yeah.
We've mentioned the 4 individuals who were present. And you told us the condition that you were in, and anyone would have known that you had been tortured. Tell us what happened in that room.
In the interview room, Mohammed Haidara, who was leading that interview, told me that it was better for me to cooperate with him or them Otherwise, these men will come back, meaning, of course, the torturers will come back. And I asked him what was his question. He repeated these things, that who was this James, and why was I congratulating Omar Ba, and was I reporting for any newspaper called the Freedom Paper? I didn't make any sense of what he was saying. I kept repeating that I actually had no idea what you were talking about. And he repeated these things, that it was better for me to cooperate. And then after a while, Maliamugu shouted in Mandinka, said, I told you that let's kill this man. Meaning, of course, that his advice was at the beginning. He told him, I told you. That's how he put it. I told you we have to kill this man, otherwise he wouldn't talk. Whether that was to scare me or perhaps to, whether he actually meant what he said, I didn't know. But I was terrifically scared because I knew his reputation as a vicious man. I mean, if there was a Maliamugo, there must be an Idi Amin. So I knew the history of both of them. So I knew these guys, I mean, they didn't name him just out of the blue. He certainly must have earned his reputation correctly by his own actions. So I was pretty scared, especially when he said, I should be killed, otherwise I wouldn't have talked.
So if he was Maliamungu, then who was Idi Amin?
If there was a Maliamugu, Isaac Maliamugu Council was a notorious general in Idi Amin's army, whom Amin himself had to confess to one of his ministers that sometimes Amin himself wondered whether the man had not gone mad because of the vicious ways he handled his victims. So if there was a person in the military who had that nickname, definitely there must be an Idi Amin on whose behalf he was acting. I read a lot of dictatorship around the world. I knew how they work. I suddenly felt that I was in a terrible danger at that night.
In your opinion, who was Idi Amin in this context?
Well, it has to be Yahya Jammeh because Maliamugu, and what was funny as well, I should say that, because all the time that question was happening, Maliamugu was always on the phone. He would interrupt the thing and go and come back. In my mind, he was in full uniform. Tumbul Tamba was there, who could have been his head, or his senior perhaps. So if he was communicating at that night, going and coming, who was he communicating to? I had conjectured all that night. And I had a conclusion that he was being controlled. And everything that was happening that night, as I later find out, was being controlled from State House. Because my release, as I would tell you, come out from State House.
But at that time that he was leaving the room to speak on the phone, you cannot tell us for sure who he was
I didn't know when he was talking. But he apparently didn't want that conversation to be had in that room. He was going and coming back.
Could you describe his behavior, his demeanor to the person he was speaking to on the phone? Did you observe anything?
Whenever the phone vibrates, because I think I've never had it ring. It must have I never had it ring. It must be vibrate. He would go out, talk, and come back. Pick the phone, go, and come back. He did that many times during the parade. He didn't say much. All what he said was, I told you this guy should be killed. Otherwise, he wouldn't say anything. And Mohammed Haider said, I should cooperate with them, otherwise these people will come back, meaning the torturers. I told Mohammed I didn't have any clue as to what his questions are. I didn't know these games they are talking about until the next panel. That's when I don't know whether I had answered their right question or what. But they suddenly asked me to go to bed.
Still focusing on that particular interview by Mr. Haidara, Deputy Director of NIA, Mr. Seka, Head of Operations, Maliamungu, Musa Jammeh, as well as Tumbul Tamba. You told us that the questions that you were being asked by Mr. Haidara were essentially similar to the ones that Tumbul Tamba had asked while you were being tortured. Is that correct?
Exactly the same questions.
And you told us that Mr. Haidara actually said if you do not cooperate, then you would be sent back to your torture.
He said these men will come. These men will come back. That's what he said. It was better and in my own interest to cooperate with him.
How long did that process take, the questioning in that office?
That took another 20 minutes or so. Nuru Seka was not saying anything, but he was busy. He was writing down everything. He didn't say a word, but he was busy. He had volumes of papers in front of him, as well as Mohammed Haidara. Munuru was jotting down. He never said anything throughout the process. Even
Did
in the
he
next,
do
even on the
anything?
next day, he didn't say anything. But he was
Did he
busy
do
writing.
anything during that time?
Pardon?
You told us that he didn't say anything.
Nuru Saka didn't say a word, but he was very busy on the papers. He was writing.
Apart from what he was writing down, did he do anything else during the time that you were
No, he didn't say a word throughout until after, when I was about to be released. That was the time he came and directly addressed me.
But he could visibly see that you had been tortured,
Of
and
course,
he heard the words
Of
that
course, I
Mr.
came from the
Haidar said.
torture chambers, whatever the name is, they call it ring there, and brought to the desk. So almost everybody in the room knew they were part of the torturing process, because he was said I was going to go back there if I didn't cooperate. So everybody in that room knew I was tortured. And that was a process of the interview. There was no doubt. The torture was part of the process.
After that, where were you taken?
I was asked to go back to the reception. And like I said, when I got there, this woman, kind woman, Dr. Kamasa, was definitely devastated, with my looks. And she started helping me and, praying. And the rest of the detainees, Lamin Fati, who was actually our imam there, was also consoling me. Malimbu told me, Cham, I have been here, I've seen worse things. They've even put a gun in my mouth. Cham, you have to be here. I've been here for 5 months. So they kind of consoled me and kind of calmed my nerves and made me comfortable a bit. But then, of course, I remained in terrific fear, because knowing the type of people who were in charge of this process, I felt that I was in terrible danger. And of course, why I was in danger, because Tumbul had always said that they knew at the time the journalists who are responsible for sending out government secrets, that the most well-known among them was Ibrahim Silla and me, and myself, Lamin Jam. He told me that.
When did he say that?
He said that during the torture. He said that. So at the time, Silla was not in the country, having fled, I think, a year and a half earlier. So I came to this conclusion: these people had rated me very high in terms of their consideration of being who is the enemy to the state. So I became terrified. I knew, of course, I was rated very, very high among their enemies. So I spent the whole night in terrific fear of what may happen next.
You told us that when you saw Mr. Malik Mboob as well as Mr. Lamin Fati, you were surprised.
Yes.
Why were you surprised?
Because I didn't know where they were there. Everybody knew, of course, they have been missing, and we all knew the usual suspects. I mean, there exists no bandits or no bandit gang in this country. Whoever is picked up is taken chance on, we know that. So I've always known that they've been kept somewhere, but I didn't know they were at the NIA there until that night when I saw them.
You told us that Mr. Mboob told you about how he was treated, including a gun being shoved.
He told me that, Cham, you have to be here. I have been through worse things. They even put a gun in my mouth. So you haven't seen anything.
So when he said, considering that you had just been tortured and you were visibly injured, when he said, they've done worse things to me, you haven't seen anything else, what did you understand by that?
Well, I understood. Having just come out from the torture chambers, I believe him, that he really is speaking from experience, and maybe was fit. I was waiting for an even worse situation. It just continued to heighten my fears to the kind of situation I was at the time.
Meaning he too, Mr. Mboob, had been tortured at the NIA?
Almost certainly. That has been told to me even before, even after his own NIA staffs and for other detainees told me.
What about Mr. Fati?
Mr. Fati had been taken away 3 or so months prior to my detention. Actually, I think that 2006 year was a year I would have, I was probably destined to be at the hands of Jammeh, because previous to just shortly before my arrest, the Independent got into trouble. Actually, when Mr. Jallo, Baba Gale, left, his wife, who was taking charge of the office, Mr. Jallo wanted to appoint me as manager of the Standard, of the Independent at the time. His wife approached me about it. I declined the offer because I knew that the Independent was, in fact, at the time, It was like the Daily Observer. It replaced the Daily Observer as #1 top target for the government. So I kind of dragged my feet on that offer until the lady found out perhaps that I may not be interested or I'm a bit scared. Then there was a time they approached Madi Sise, who's now the National Assembly member of Serekunda West. Madi came up and became manager and immediately went into trouble with the authorities along with Lamin Fati and some of his staff. They were arrested, tortured as well. And then I avoided that arrest, because if I were a manager, I would have been forced there. But when I went there and found what they went through, and Lamin was still there, I said, well, Lamin, you know, I knew I was going to be the man in place of Madi if I had taken the job, you know. And I remember Mr. Jallo wrote to me from America and said, well, you don't know how dictators work. You didn't escape me anyway. So you see, that was particularly very bad year. And Lamin had been there before me. He stayed there even longer. Even after I left, Malik and Lamin were still there.
So you've told us that Lamin Fati worked for the Independent.
Yes.
What about Malik Mboob?
Malik Mboob had been a reporter at our office at the Daily Observer. He left to work for the RVH. He apparently was suspected to be either reporting or must have had contact with Pandey Rimbai, because the whole episode was about freedom. So whether he was suspected to have been informing Pandey when he was at the Observer or later after he left to be PRO at the hospital, I don't know. But then he was arrested and detained and tortured as a result of his suspected connection with freedom.
So after this occurred, you were taken back to the room where you found these other journalists who had been missing for quite some time.
Yeah.
You also told us that you met Madam Duto Kamaso. What else happened? Did anything else happen that night?
Yeah, after, you know, she took care of me and these other detainees comforted me. The next day, they took me to hospital, military hospital. And one 4-day camera who was a driver, I think he's still there. He's the driver of, at the time he was the driver for one Mr. Shaw. I cannot remember which of the Shaws, because there are too many Shaws at the NIA at the time, and there are still a Shaw. Usman O. Samba Shaw was, that person was the head of investigations at the time. Samba Shaw or Usman Shaw, I'm not sure which one.
Did you see this Mr. Sow at
no,
the NIA
I have
during
not
that
seen
time?
this Mr. Sow with my eyes. But his driver was instructed to take me, and he told me that my boss said I should take you to the military hospital. That's just state, they used to call it State Guard Hospital, next to the State House. I don't know whether that was out of generosity or a further attempt to conceal my wounds from, because I would have loved to go to the public hospital anyway. And I was not released after. I think they wanted to conceal my injuries for some time. Even when my friend came, I actually went twice, my friend came there, and they were told that I was not there. One of them told them, look, this car right here, because my car could be seen just as you enter. This car belonged to him. So if this guy here, he must be here. I said, no, I wasn't there. So when he eventually managed to find his way, he told me, Cham, I didn't expect you to be released now, because the way you were looking, these people would allow you to go out. So I don't know whether that act of taking me to the State Guard Hospital was an act of generosity or was an attempt to conceal, to quickly get my wounds treated so that at least I would look a little better.
Can you tell us what kind of medical treatment you received at the
They just dressed my bandages here, and my feet also. The guy cleaned my feet and put on bandages, and I was taken back to the NIA. I was driven by 4-day camera, like I said. He was a driver, under the instruction of his boss, who then was head of investigations. I saw whether it was Samba or Usman, I wasn't sure.
Can you tell us what happened when you returned to the NIA?
I stayed there, nobody told me. 2 days later, Tumbul Tamba returned. That was another very, very terrific night for me, because, you know, I was learning the ways they walked from people who have been there and from the books, etc. I was told that whenever they came for a detainee and they didn't enter the NIA, then there's bad news for that detainee. Meaning if the vehicles come from State House and did not enter, they just park and people come to pick that detainee, Normally there's bad news for that detainee. So I was told that I knew about that. So all the night I didn't sleep. I was waiting, what will come? What form will they come? Will they enter or will they stay outside? That was always in my mind.
Do you recall how many detainees were detained in the same place as you were at that time?
A lot. Apart from these three, there were others there. There was a Lamin Bojang, who, I don't know, he was working at MRC. I heard his story. And there was a little boy, a teenage, no, not even a teenage, a very small boy. I heard about his story. He was brutally tortured there too, all in connection with this freedom.
Do you recall the name of this?
I cannot remember
teenage,
this. His case was definitely very, very touching. He was a very small boy. I was told how he was horrendously tortured. And that was all. And there's this Lamin Bojang, who was also a staff of MRC. I remember. And there was a Buba Bojang. Buba Bojang is a soldier. I think he's still serving. He saw me. He saw me in those conditions. He was from Rikam, I think. Even now, when we meet, he cracked these jokes about what happened to me at that place. Buba Bojang, he too was detained in connection with this freedom thing.
To focus on the little boy that you talked about, you said he wasn't even a teenager.
He couldn't have been more than 10.
And you said from
I
what
saw him after, I think that was after his torture, when he was coming and going, I don't know, to report or something. And I was told that he was brutally tortured. I cannot remember the name. I spent years looking for that boy.
And what kind of information did you hear about how he was tortured, or what exactly
I think the
happened?
boy was some sort of a computer wizard, somebody who was very, very much grounded in IT. And they suspected either he was communicating with Pandari or was helping some people communicate, or try to help them access freedom or something like that. I didn't know what his suspected crimes were supposed to be, but I was told that he was tortured in very gruesome ways.
And do you know who allegedly tortured him?
Oh, the same gang. I mean, apparently, the panel that interviewed us was the panel that was set up after the March 2006 attempted coup led by Nur Cham. They had this joint panel of NIA, police, and state guards. So this was the panel. The panel apparently was not dissolved when the freedom case came about. So that panel continued. So it's easy to realize that was the panel. The same methods that were used, the Durcham, were the same methods used to deal with the freedom.
You've already mentioned the names of 4 individuals. Apart from these individuals, that is Tumbul Tamba, Musa Jame, Nuru Seka, and Mr. Haidara, did you recognize any of the members of the panel?
The panel, there was, my name is Sheikh Lamin Cham, a policeman from Sukuta. That was Botoketa, of course, I know. Not in the panel at the time, but he was, he did the initial transportation to Banjul and other places. And then later they came, Lamin Cham, Abdullah Sise. I don't know what was his rank and what is his rank now because he's still serving. He was in the panel.
What security outfit did he belong to?
Police. Lamin Cham, there was a Lamin Dao also, he was also police. There was Lamin Cham, there was Bodo Keita, and there was this Abdullah Sise, who appeared to be, in fact, I think more senior among them. But later, I was surprised myself because what happened was, after my torture, I saw these policemen came themselves. When they saw me, the first one who saw me actually appeared to be shocked when he looked at me. And I saw a couple of minutes later, they all came passing me, almost in single file, because this is a narrow place. They came almost in single file, and everybody was glancing, was looking at my face. I knew they were probably either shocked or not happy with what happened to me. And later, much later, I heard that the police abandoned that panel in protest, principally in protest at what happened to me, because they saw that glaringly. That's what I learned from what happened. But clearly I saw them, they weren't happy. Their faces weren't looking good when they saw me. They appeared to be shocked.
When they saw you, was it after the first time you were tortured?
After
or
the
was
first
it
torture, they came, and the first one who saw me went, and then I saw them coming, and they were all looking at me. They passed.
And just to be clear, these police officers were not part of the,
no, the police
people who interviewed you?
No, they were not part of the torture. And they appeared to be clearly and visibly shocked when they saw my look on the morning of my torture. And I later learned that because of that, they eventually moved out of that panel in protest to what happened to me.
Who did you hear that from? Do you recall?
I followed him closely after this thing, after my release. After my release, I was reporting there until they told me that if I was needed, I would be called. I was following the story because I always wanted to write this story and have a way of saying it. So I was following them. I interviewed police anonymously, and they told me that that's what happened. Your case, they told me, actually was the last straw for us because we never wanted to be part of this torture process. But your case actually was what made us say, well, look, we had enough, we're not going to be part of this panel. The senior policeman told me that.
So we've already discussed what happened to you the first time you were tortured. You said 2 days later they came back for you. Can you tell us about that?
This time he was very much in a hurry. I don't know where he was going. He didn't enter the place with the car. So like I told you before, I had this story that if they didn't enter, that would be bad news for any detainee they came for. So when he came and there wasn't any vehicle, well, you could imagine how I felt that day. But Tumbul seemed to be very much in a hurry. He just came and followed by 2, 3 men. They went behind the ring, and then he said, "I was going to give you a final chance." Even before he said anything, they started beating again. Then
was Musa Jame present?
No, that time he was not.
So it was Tumbul and 3 individuals.
Yes.
And can you describe how they were dressed?
They were in this kind of. The gun was not as large as the previous one, and Tumbul said he was giving me a last touch, and they started beating. Oh, it didn't last long this much, and I was ushered into this room where these 2 men were, Haidara and Seka again.
Before that, the 3 individuals who were beating you, what were they using to beat you?
Again, whips and stomp. They were using their fist much of the time.
Did Tumbul Tamba himself participate in the beating on that occasion?
No, he kept asking the same question, and he warned me that was the last time, final time, then the final chance.
You told us that it didn't last for long. Do you recall
Yes.
how long that torture lasted?
Not as long as the previous one, maybe 10 minutes or something. Then I was ushered into this room, and I think Tumbul was very much in a hurry that night. He didn't stay long, and this Haidara and Nuru Seka repeated the same questions.
Was it in the same room as the previous?
Yes, the same room.
Do you recall where that room was located in the
It
building?
is somewhere in the below the story building that was when you enter the NIA. That's the building you really look right in front of you. The place has been changed obviously now, but that was the first building you see somewhere under. Maybe the first floor, so that's where the thing happened.
You've already told us about the injuries you suffered after the first time you were tortured. Can you tell us if you suffered any injuries after the second time, the second incident of torture?
Of course, the head, the second one, I think I received knocks more on the head than anywhere. And when I came to the room, there were a lot of gadgets. I don't know where they got that. I was pretty scared. I thought perhaps there were going to be more gadgets used on me or so, but they didn't do that.
What kind of gadgets are you referring to?
They had cables or something like that. I cannot make out what was that. Whether they were recording as well, to were recording materials or filming, I don't know. But there were gadgets there. I thought that those were going to be used on me, but they didn't do that. In fact, they seemed to be in a hurry that day because after 2 or 3 questions, Haidara put down his things and said, "Cham, you can go to sleep." And I went to sleep. I was never tortured again.
But during that meeting, what was Mr. Nuru Seka's role in that
Nuru was,
second
like I said,
interview?
never said anything. He was busy writing. Haidara was apparently the head of the investigations in that room. And probably even alongside the torturers, because apparently it's always from the torture chambers to his office. And he was a person in charge of questions. The line of questions all came from him.
Can you tell us what happened after that?
I was asked to go and sleep. I went back to the reception. This following day, Nuru Seka, this is the first time he came to directly address me. He said, well, I'm going to write a report about you, but this has to be after Friday prayers. Because these people, meaning people at State House, will only look after this after Friday prayers. So you could see all my suspicions were confirmed that all these things are orchestrated from State House. And what he said is exactly what happened. After Friday prayers, he came to me and said, go and get somebody who will, with an ID card, who will come to bail you. I called Abdul Salam, when I didn't get him, I called Alkali. Jajusi was my neighbor. Alkali Jajusi came and used his ID card. And that was how I left. I was told to come every day. I was going every day. Each time I arrive, before I go in there, I go to a nearby phone booth and call the British High Commission. I'm coming to report. I'm going to report. And after, immediately I left, I will call them back. Now I'm safe, I've just left there. It went on like that until they told me, now, if we are needed, you will go. But then, what Tumbul Tamar others told me was that myself and Ibrahim Silla were the people, they were told, are the principal agents of taking information, sensitive or secret about the government overseas. That if I should come back, if I should make the mistake to invite it back there, and that would not be good news. And
so
why would I report?
Essentially, he threatened you.
Pardon?
Essentially, he threatened you.
Yes, and why would I report without mentioning Jamme's name? So obviously, I knew that it was too dangerous to operate as an independent journalist because it was, I mean, those people, if those people are the people who are going to determine or assess what the content of a news report is, then we are in trouble because they're looking only for Jamme's name, whatever context. So meaning they don't have the capacity to be able to, or the knowledge to be able to assess whether in fact a report is inaccurate or whether it is fair or balanced. All what they do, if you mention Jammeh, you are in trouble. That's what he told me. Why couldn't I report without mentioning Jammeh?
Before you proceed, I want to ask a couple of questions.
Yeah.
On the first occasion, you said it was clear that Mr. Haidara, the deputy director, and Mr. Nuruseka, head of operations, knew that you had been tortured.
Of course, they were there.
What about the second occasion?
They were there. They knew that. Because I was from the territory chambers to come to them, and Tumbul was talking to them. Whenever Tumbul came to their place, they will be the first point of contact. We would talk to them, and then they come to us. So they definitely were working in tandem with Tumbul during the entire process. There's no doubt about it. There was no doubt about it.
You told us that you, from everything that you heard, including your conversation with Mr. Nuruseka, you knew that the entire process was being orchestrated from State House.
He told me he was to write a report, but I should sit and wait and expect it to be only reactions from that report or whatever will follow, only after Friday prayers. This must be Friday the 4th June, 2006. Only after that would he receive an outcome, and that's exactly what happened.
So you were in detention for about 5 days.
About that.
During that time, were you taken out of detention apart from the instance when you were taken to the military clinic?
Yes, I was even made to be part of a police operation. Like I told you the last time, at the time of the torture, I didn't know the connection between Panderi and Omarba. Now, I was put in a car, which was in fact the lead car at the time, and we were driven to Bundung. Apparently they knew the general direction of Omar's house. I myself didn't know personally Omar Ba's exact address, but I knew that that was where I used to drop him whenever we closed from work, midnight plus. I would drive all the night staff and I would drop Omar at that place. I didn't know the exact. So apparently the police and whoever they knew the direction where he lived. So I was made to sit in a car with a policeman while they went all around that place. So I knew they were looking for Omar Ba. They asked me they asked me what was his description. Was, you know, the black teen man who used to limp. They got all that information. That was all correct about him. Do I know any address where he lived apart from that place? No, I don't even know this correct address where he lived. And later in the evening, I heard a public announcement that Omar was wanted, that whoever lodged him would be himself or herself in trouble. So
as
I
far
began
as-
to piece things together that, okay, my case probably is linked with Omar. And when they came to ask about Omar, I knew that perhaps, our cases were linked. So I was in the police operation trying to locate Omar.
In the span of those...
And then, of course, I was also escorted to my house. They were looking for papers. They came to my house and ransacked my cupboard. There were only fixtures of GFA football leagues and so many other things. They looked at them and then they said we could go. We went back.
Did you freely allow the police access to your home in order to conduct that search?
I didn't have any option. They said we are going to your house. I said, okay, let's go.
Did they present you with a search warrant
No.
for the search of your house?
They did not. I was not given any option. I was told that we'll be going home. I said, let's go. So we went.
The police operation regarding Mr. Omar Ba's residence in Bundung and the operation regarding your house, search of your house, did that happen on the same day, at the same time?
Oh, the following day. Omar was the same day, the way of God, but the mine was this following day. Because actually they were, after my house, they brought me to a room where they went through my email address. They asked me to, open my email. I did that. And they went through. Even the mails I trust, or I thought have been deleted, I don't know how they were able to bring them back, but they showed me emails. Because I knew at a time that I have never in my life, written to or communicated with Panderi. So I was very sure that if they were looking for evidence of that nature, it wasn't there. I was very confident. And they had a form too, where they were marking. I guess correct means maybe that one is clear. So there was an internet email post on that they marked correct just after that. And when I look back, I saw Duta Kamazo too also in the queue. It must have been when I left that she too was put to open her mail or whatever. It was at the same time. They had a form also. They wanted people to say which political parties they voted for. They wanted that. At the time, the last time I voted was 97. I remember Malik Mbu was there. He was always a jovial man. He said, "Cham, are you entering APRC just for them to leave you?" That was a joke, and I said, okay, do whatever you like. So I ticked. I didn't vote. I didn't know what I ticked. I can't remember. I didn't vote for years before that. 97 was the last time I voted. They had that form asking which political affiliation I had at the time.
Apart from your political affiliation, what other types of questions were you asked?
Where I came from. They first asked, where did I come from? Where was I born? What ethnic group was I? They asked all those questions.
So in the span of the 5 days, can you locate for us when those police operations occurred? Was it after a day or two?
I think the second day of my arrest was the day, it was suddenly before my torture that we went for Omar, that I was made to be part of the police operation searching for Omar, and then to my house. When I was going to my house, I wasn't tortured. So those were immediately the day I was taken or the day before the tortures. After the torture, I was not let out, only to the military, to the State Guard Hospital and back.
You told us about your release, the context of it, and thereafter you were told to report every day.
Yeah.
Where were you reporting to?
At the NIA.
At the NIA.
Yeah. There was a show there. I told you there are many shows at the NIA at the time. There are still shows, I think. I don't know which of the shows, but there's this fair-colored one who was, in fact, the one giving us food at the time. So it was to him that we were reporting. That's different from the show whose driver took me to the State Guard Hospital.
And you said the Sao whose driver took you to the State Guard Hospital was the head of investigations at the time.
I don't know his first name. It's either an Usman or a Samba.
Do you know where that Sao is presently? What is his current position?
I didn't see any of the Sao. The only Sao I saw there is still there. That was the guy who was giving us food, and he was the one always with us. That's still there. That Sao is still there. He's not Usman. Yes, he's there. I think at some point, I learned from the news that he too got into trouble with the system and was detained and sacked, and I think he's reinstated. Yeah, that was the Sao who I would say was the one with us all the time. And it was to him we were reporting after my release, until I was asked by him the guy who came with his ID card to bail me said he signed my bail at the office of a soul. I don't know which soul is that. He said that was a soul whose office I signed your bail. I don't know which soul is this.
You told us that the reporting at the NIA was every day. Do you recall for how long?
Well over a month. Well over a month, because shortly after my release, I think 3 weeks after the African Union Summit took place, and I remember when I was going to the AU, I used to go to report first and then go to the AU to check preparations at the time. I was doing a story on the preparations, etc. So it took more than a month.
In terms of the members who were part of the torture operation, do you know where Tumbul Tamba is presently?
When I was in London, I heard he died. He, along with Tumbul Tamba, Tumbul Tamba and Maliamugu, I heard they both died.
Do you know under which circumstances they died?
I didn't know, but there was this strange news that one of them was actually beginning to tell stories about how he might have been involved in torture or killing of people. I heard that story. I don't know how true was that. And there were even suspicions that probably they could have been, well, like children of any revolution, they might have been eaten by the revolution itself. I'm not sure about that, but they died. Both of them are dead now.
What about Mr. Nuru Seka? Do you know where he is presently?
In fact, I saw Nuru Seka 5 days, is it 5 days ago, last Wednesday, when the SIS hosted an international conference of intelligence chiefs of West Africa. I saw him there. I've not seen him in 10 years, but I saw him there. So he's serving.
Do you know his current position?
No, I don't know. He must be senior because the time of our torture, he was operations. So if he were to go back, he probably would be that or above that.
What about Mr. Haidara, who was deputy director?
I've never seen him since I walked out of the NIA in June 2006.
Can you tell us what happened to you after you were released? You said you reported for about a month. Did you stay in the country thereafter?
Yeah, the effect was devastating on me because for the first time I was afraid to walk in my country. And I knew what happened to me, the people who are supposed to be watching what journalists do or say or report are not the people competent to judge journalists. I knew everybody who's a journalist would be in trouble, who wants to work independently would be in trouble in this country. The only course open for me was to leave the country. And I was so devastated I lost a job because in fact I was no need for me to go out of the country. I was a BBC correspondent which had better pay than any local job you can do in the media here. But I knew that was more dangerous. I have been eye-marked. It was impossible to work when those people are in power. So I had to leave the country. I suffered a great deal, my family suffered a great deal. I went to London. Some friends helped me to do a crash course at London School of Journalism, leading to an advanced diploma. I flew to Dakar to continue my exile. Dakar, of course, a francophone country. I would say some of the Gambian exile journalists who were there before picked up all the English language jobs. It wasn't possible to work there. So that my suffering just continued. I lost income, self-dignity. I mean, I was very well known all around, admired all over the Gambia. Suddenly, I was made an enemy of the state. Nobody in the justice system would like to talk to me for long. People told me your telephone will be tapped as long as this case lasts. I was completely devastated. For the first time, I walked like, I looked like I was not 11 Jam, who used to be admired by everybody. I knew I could not walk normally now. And this because knowing the kind of people who are supposed to watch us, I knew this country would be terrible for journalists to work under.
And at the time, you mentioned that your family suffered terribly. Did you have children at that time?
Yeah, I had children who was very young. At the time, my second was Usman, who was just 1 year, a little over a month. I was taking, but then I had a lot of dependents. I come from a family where my brother had a lot of brothers and all their children. I was trying as much as possible to look after them. Everybody was devastated. Everybody feared for my life, like my safety in the country. I sometimes acted stupidly. I became completely different person the person who have never known, that kind of situation. I was put in that situation. And all that was through fear.
And how much time did you spend essentially in exile before returning to the Gambia?
It must have been well over 5 years because, like I said, the rest of it was spent in Dakar, Senegal.
When did you finally return to the Gambia?
It must be in the mid of 2012.
2012?
Yeah, I think somewhere around that, or late 2011. It was certainly after the 2011 election, so it was early 2012, yeah.
Looking at your present circumstances today, what would you say are the residual effects that these incidents, meaning the torture, the fear, having to go into exile, what impact does that continue to have on you?
Well, I told you, now I've picked up a little bit, but I definitely am a completely different man. I used to be very confident in what I do. Like I said, I was very much respected and seen to be the light of a right thinking somebody. I was criminalized when I was detained and tortured. I don't think I have psychologically, even in terms of resources, I have not recovered. I haven't recovered. I'm still a broken man from that experience.
Mr. Cham, thank you very much for answering my questions. I have come to the end. I will hand over the floor to the chairman so that the commissioners may ask further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counsel, and thank you, Mr. Cham, for your testimony. Our commissioners, maybe we have questions to ask. Before that, I have one quick question. What role did the Gambia Press Union play during your arrest and the detention?
Yes, I remember at a time I was, I didn't receive financial support, but I actually received a lot of solidarity from the Gambia Press Union about what happened to me. So I didn't receive financial support or anything, but I mean, the people who knew what happened to me were concerned, and I think they have written to the Human Rights, African Commission on Human Rights here, and my case was forwarded to them. They themselves told me that the GPU had been talking about me. So I commend them. And when I went outside also, whenever I wanted reference, the GPU will always, quickly send me attestations to say exactly what happened to me. So I received a lot of solidarity from them. They were not in the financial position, of course, to help me, but what I expected was moral support, and I got that.
Thank you. Commissioners, may you have any questions? Anyone? Commissioner Carr, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You said there was a certain Army PRO who wasn't happy with Deda's work, but I didn't hear you mention his name. Do you remember him?
Yes. Shortly before Deda's murder, there was a press conference organized by the Army. Bunja Dabo was PRO. That press conference was very critical of the Point newspaper. And the Point, of course, was Deda's paper. So that was just prelude. That was just unfortunate prelude to his murder. So there was a lot of animosity you could see from the security people. And of course, when it also happened at the time when the independent newspaper was attacked and burnt. While they were assaulting the paper, one of the people involved dropped a gun. Now, this gun got the story, and I remember the photograph of this gun was printed on the front page of this Point, and even some analysis made that suggesting that it could only have come from the Army. That is what incurred the wrath of the Army and prompted that press conference, and they were very hostile to the Point. It was not long after that Deda died, was killed. If there were other motives that was built up along the years, because generally everybody was operating on a difficult climate, but then it happened shortly after that. So just tells you how I felt that. Personally, I felt that, look, come on, this could only have been state sanctioned, because I mean, it couldn't be coincidental that they were, they were up in arms against the point, and after that we said they died. I had my personal feeling that something is definitely it's very serious has happened. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ma'am Jallo, you have the floor, please.
Mr. Cham,
Yeah.
you have described very clearly what all that happened to you. Now, can you tell us if there are any more repressive laws that are detrimental to the progress of journalists in the Gambia?
Yes, well, to be fair, when this new government came to power, they have done a lot in removing most of the obstacles that were put in place by the Jammeh regime. But there are still concerns, as you said, indicated by the GPU. They're challenging laws of defamation, sedition, etc. Not all that is completely out. I think some aspects of it are still being challenged in the courts. I think the only way now for this government to do is to do away as soon as possible those laws and restrictions that impede the work of the media. I'm quite sure that we probably will never get to the days when journalists have to be killed, tortured, or imprisoned just because of what they've written. I know we're not going to go back there. But there is always a risk that as long as there exist loopholes that the powers that be can exploit, there is a risk that they will come back to it and exploit it to curtail freedom of expression. Remember, I told you journalists are communication agents. If somebody is not happy with what has been said about him or her, it targets those communication agents to muzzle them, stifle them, or as it happened in few cases under Jammeh, to kill them. So if there are such loopholes there, we want them all removed. We want unfettered access to information and disseminating it in the interest of the public. There should be no restrictions. Even though the government have done very well, I think there are still issues that still need to be completely dealt with.
Mr. Chair, just
A point of order too,
yes,
right?
yes, just to assist the Commissioner Jallo to indicate that the GPU is going to speak to this particular issue. And when the next witness arrives, he will talk about the repressive laws, the steps that have been taken to amend them, what is left in the books, and what they expect should happen in the not too distant future. So if there are any gray areas, I think this would be clarified when the next witness testifies. Thank you.
Thank you for that guidance. Bishop, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Lamin Cham.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kenneth Wybes was the founder and proprietor of the Daily Observer newspaper in the Gambia. He came here as a refugee from Liberia, and he was deported back to where he was running from. Can you tell us whether he actually went directly to Liberia, or did he go to another country?
I think he definitely went to Liberia first, because at the time, all what the junta understood his origin to be was Liberia. And the planes that were going out of Banjul, there was no direct flight to America. I believe, in fact, I remember the plane was a Bellevue airline. I could be mistaken, ADC or Bellevue, and that was going to either Monrovia, Freetown, Monrovia, and along the other coast. So I think Mr. Best's first port of call when he was bundled out in November '94 was Liberia, where he actually ran away from.
Thank you. My second question, actually, you did mention that in May 1999, the Daily Observer was sold to Mr. Amadou Samba. Did you know whether Mr. Betts was compensated for the Daily Observer that he actually founded and owned, which was sold to somebody else.
Are you saying whether he was the one who actually sold the paper, or you are suggesting it was taken from him without any monetary?
No, I'm not suggesting that.
Okay.
According to what you have said here, that in May 1999, the newspaper was sold to Mr. Amadou Samba.
Yes.
So I just want to know, because the man was deported.
Yes.
He was deported. So who sold the newspaper?
Okay. Now, from November 94 right down to May 99, the paper was still owned by Mr. Best. He appointed Theophilus George as managing director and asked the management to recruit more journalists and continue to work. But sometime along the way, I think, I never spoken to Mr. Best, he felt perhaps he wasn't happy with either one, the monetary aspect of it, or the operations. He decided to sell it. I knew he sold it because a letter came from him that was pasted on the board announcing that from now on, let all staff be informed that the Observer is now owned by Amadou Samba. I saw that with my own eyes in May 1999. So there's no point that it was Mr. Best who sold it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Imam C, you have the floor.
Mr. Cham.
Mr. Cham.
How
are you?
Well,
what I want to ask is that
mooy freedom yim doon bañ pour ngeen jokkalante ak ñoom nguur gi daf ko tere woon pour ngeen jokkalante ak ñoom wala dañ tere woon ay yeneen kaddu ñoom ñu jot ko.
Waaw nguur gi bëggutoon affaire freedom because ba nga doon wax ne li xewoon fi mooy
what was happening here was that
nguur gi
government
dafa aaye
they refuse
journaliste yëpp pour ñuy report seen mbir wala ngay report affaire yi opposition wala lépp loo xam ne la ñoom bëgguñ ko mu feeñ
opposition or anything to
duñ dee nangu mu feeñ su feeñee journaliste bi ko binda ak fuñ ko bindee da ngeen di am problème su ñu leen invité NIA dañ leen yóbbu police jëm la bundu xatam léegi nag loolu tax na léegi journaliste yu bari léegi bàyyi nañ di binda lépp loo xam ne dafa ŋaaña nguur gi muy jógee ci opposition wala mu jógee ci leneen wala képp koo xam ne dafa am beneen xalaat lu utee ak mu nguur ñoom bëgguñ ko fii loolu moo tax ñi nga xam ne journaliste lañ te daw nañ dem America wala Angleterre ñooñu dañ continuer ci journalisme.
Mr. Cham, sorry to interrupt. Can you just slow down so the interpretation can follow?
So ñu defar newspaper yoo xam ne ci internet la nekk.
They created a newspaper which is on the internet.
nga xam ne boobu.
which you know that will be.
kenn du leen mën a jot fu ñu nekk.
no one will lay hand on that one.
li nga xam ne def dee xew fii te nguur gi bëggut mu feeñ fii.
that is happening here and government don't want it, that information to be revealed.
ñoom dañ koo bind fale nit ñaa ngi fii di.
they will write it over there then
people gis loolu di xam lan moo xew ci dëkk
and they will know what is happening in the country.
demee na ba waxtu boo xam ne sax. ñi nekk ci bitim réew ñoo dee gën a xam sax lan moo xew fii.
they will know what is happening in the country than all
ñi fi nekk duñ ko dee xam. loolu ak loo xam ne ay secret la.
that is secrecy.
nguur bi bëggut kenn xam ko fii.
government don't want some people to know it.
lu bari ay affaire human rights violations
about human rights violations and many other things.
kayit yu mel ni freedom newspaper yooyu dañ ko dee
papers just like freedom paper. they
bari la woon waaye ji ci gën a feeñ nguur gi gënoon a bañ.
but the former government what they don't want.
mooy freedom newspaper.
that is freedom newspaper.
at boobu nag comme ni ma ko waxee.
that as I said.
ñun dañ dégg ne. ki nga xam ne moo yore freedom te def ko dee bind.
the person who owns freedom newspaper
xaw ma naka lañ duggee ci compte am email am.
I don't know how do they able to penetrate onto get into his email.
dañ fa jël xibaar boo xam ne dafa am ay nit ñi fi nekk ñoo xam ne ñoo dee joxlante am moom.
he said there are people who normally feed him on informations.
léegi ñu oo ñooñu yëpp ci police station.
they call all of them at the police station.
di seet kan moo dee jogalante ak kii.
And they looked who normally give him information.
ci bés yooyu nag nga commencé di.
During those days, that was the time they started oppressing people, torturing people,
kan moo dee joxe information.
trying to know who normally give that person information. That was the thing.
Thank you very much. One very brief question for you from me before we proceed to you making final remarks, if you have any to make. If you can expound a little bit on the fear that really was put in you when either Tumbulu Tamba or Musa Jame kept on repeating, I guess not one day, but several days, that kill this man. I told you to kill this man, he wouldn't talk. How did you cope with that fear?
Well, like I said, that was really a very terrific moment for me because like I told you, I knew Maliamugo from his reputation being a very vicious man. And like I told you, I read a lot of types of dictatorships all around, even in the region. I know about Idi Amin, about Samuel Doe, about a lot of regimes that really violate the human rights of the people. If Malia Mugu had that nickname, and Michael, that nickname came from his own colleagues, soldiers. They gave him that nickname. And it didn't come just as just any ordinary nickname. It came, he earned a reputation. So when he told me that the only thing, he told the panel that the only thing in Mandinka, I told you from the beginning that the only way to get this man talking is to kill him. He said that in plain Mandinka. I was terrifically scared because I knew from reputation he was capable of doing that. I had told you earlier that Hydra was killed. So, and the fact that I was painted in a picture that really suggested that I was probably among the most, wanted or hated figure in the media at the time, because they mentioned Ibrahim and me, I knew the Maliamugu may probably be very serious, and he may meant what he said. So I was terrifically feared when he said I should have been killed. I would have been killed right away because he knew I wouldn't have. I was pretty scared and continue to be even after I left the place. And he made it clear that if I ever gave them a cause or reason to come back, that would be a different story.
Thank you very much, Emma. If you have any concluding remarks to make, please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. All I have to say is I think this process is a very good process. From the beginning when this TRRC was talked about, I felt that here was an opportunity now for us to talk to the people of the Gambia about what journalists and journalism had gone through over the last 22 years. I've already said that our profession and professionals were the people who suffered the most on the Jammeh. Because apparently, Jammeh's mode of operandi was he was going to be the Lord and nobody else was going to have a different opinion. And the only means of getting different opinion or opinions divergent or opposing his side is through the press. So he directly targeted the press for oppression using all sorts of methods he had, including killing her. So when we had gone through that situation, and now that we have come from a new era, I think it is incumbent upon the new leadership to ensure that never again should journalists or any other person be subjected to this kind of operations when they are doing their work. I know it will be very difficult now, in fact, for journalists themselves to leave a guard in protecting their freedoms. It will be very difficult to intimidate journalists now. But like I said, it is incumbent upon the establishment to pursue and formulate policies that will ensure that none of this type is repeated. No other loving child will be sent to Jammehs or to gallows or to NIA to be tortured, or no other data header will be shot in the street, or Chief Mane will be disappeared without trace up to now, or Omar Barrow will be shot at point blank, or dozens of others will have to leave their country to go to exile. That's what had happened to the journalist profession. And I still stand to be correct, but I think journalists suffered the most. It went up to a point that people used to leave this country and go and claim asylum under the pretext that they were, false pretext that they were journalists. Just because it was international knowledge that journalists were really under oppression in the Gambia. I am a journalist. I've been around even after the change, and I've been talking to people. And when I say people, I mean people of right thinking opinion. And what I get is that at the moment they are disappointed that the principles that really motivated the whole country to come together and pushed for a change, those principles are gradually being abandoned. I know this because I talk to people, I listen to people. My job is to listen to people, read the reporters, analyze what they've got, what the people tell them. And generally, people are getting disappointed that the establishment is not pursuing or implementing the policies and principles that will inspire the people to be in a different Gambia. Some people say, in fact, the evil forces that actually connived or perpetrated these atrocities against people are still very much alive. And they found the establishment to be either vulnerable or weak and easily manipulated. In that phase, they can easily manipulate them. Even the evil forces that Jammeh himself despised are now busy to get themselves relevant. And if we continue like that, in no time we'll go back to ground zero. And I think this should be a message that should sink down to everybody. That the people, and I said right-thinking people, who don't necessarily belong to any political parties, who were here on July the 21st, 1994, and they knew the Gambia without any tribalism, the Gambia with set rules and regulations, the Gambia where everyone was one. They are here. They tell us that they are disappointed that we are gradually going back to the period before 94 to now. And my last message, of course, will be that I must thank the people, my colleagues in the profession, for standing their ground and whether all the atrocities, animosities, and hostilities that they encountered during the Jammeh regime, and they still are committed to upholding the principles of journalism and freedom of expression. I thank them all. I thank the whole nation for believing in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jammeh, for your testimony.
Mr. Cham.
Sorry, Mr. Cham. My apologies. You are not Mr. Jammeh. I know an incarnation of that. But thank you very much, Mr. Cham, and sorry for that slip, for the testimony and for the very wise words that you just spoke. I hope and I have no doubt it would assist us in making our recommendations and doing what should be done to prevent a repeat of what happened in this country for 22 years. But thank you so much, for agreeing to come to the Commission and testifying before us. Council, we would take a break unless you want to have a witness come in before the 1:30 break. Otherwise, we will resume. Thank you. So we would take the break and then come back at 1:30. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.